Thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. My name is Michael Beckel. I am the research director at Issue One and spokesman for the National Council on Election Integrity. We had a few technical difficulties for a few minutes, but thank you for your patience and hanging out with us. We're really grateful that everyone was able to take some time. We've got a really excellent lineup today. We've got a number of speakers from the National Council on Election Integrity, including former Homeland Security Secretary and Governor of Pennsylvania, Tom Ridge, former Homeland Security Secretary, Michael Chertoff, former Senate Majority Leader, Tom Daschle of South Dakota, former Congresswoman, Donna Edwards of Maryland, former Congressman Zach Wamp of Tennessee. And to kick us off, I will turn it over to the CEO and founder of Issue One, Nick Penniman. As a reminder, we are using this Zoom function. So if you have a question, please put that into the Q&A and we will get to the questions at the end. So feel free to pop your questions into the Q&A. And with that, take it away, Nick.
Thank you, everyone. Good to see everyone today. Let me just start out with a positive note, which is that more Americans voted yesterday than they have since the 1900 election. So that's an extraordinary sign of participation in our democracy. And I think we're all incredibly gratified to see that occur. Issue One is privileged to support the National Council on Election Integrity. This group was formed just in the last month. It has 44 members, including 7 former senators, 7 former cabinet secretaries, 4 former national security officials. It's an extraordinary group. It's half Republican, half Democrat, and it politically runs the gamut from all the way from Trump supporters over to liberal Democrats. We have, since the beginning of October, we have put $5 million on TV, into TV ad campaigns, stressing the message that the process has integrity and calling for peace, patience, and a complete vote count. We have also issued a number of statements as the National Council. We have gotten more than 100 media hits. We've landed more than 24 op-eds. Another 10 are lined up to land right now. And our people have been on everywhere from Fox News to Spanish radio stations. So it's been an extraordinary launch effort for this group. And now here we are in this post-election period. We are going to begin an ad buy tomorrow in Pennsylvania. It's $1.5 million ad buy. It will run for 72 hours. Pennsylvania and Washington, D.C. These ads will air mainly in English and Spanish. And our message is simple, that voters decide the American election, not the politicians, and that we should count every vote. So with that, let me turn it over to Secretary Chertoff to begin our comments. At the end of the comments, we'll have a Q&A period. If you have questions, please put it in the Q&A chat. Secretary Chertoff.
Thanks, Nick, and thanks to all of my colleagues who are involved in this very, very important effort. You know, this election has taken place in circumstances unprecedented in my lifetime. We've obviously had a pandemic that's more serious than anything since the Spanish flu. We've had an unbelievable amount of partisan rancor, amplified by what goes on in social media. And of course, we've had a continuation of foreign interference and foreign disinformation. But with that, I think there's a good news story here. Yesterday, we had an election day with approximately 160 million people turning out, which I think is the highest percentage in the last century of eligible voters. They were able to go to the polls. There was not any widespread violence or efforts at voter suppression at the polling places. They were able to maintain safe distancing. The votes were received, absentee ballots. And so the process of conducting the election went smoothly, about as smoothly as one could possibly hope. But now we're coming, of course, to the count. And although the voting is concluded by the 3rd, the counting continues as it always has been. And one thing I might point out is we've traditionally taken absentee mail-in ballots from our servicemen and women overseas. And they certainly are entitled to have their votes counted. So at this point, we're looking to have an orderly process, expeditious but thorough and disciplined, to count all the votes so everybody's vote is counted, and then to have the results honored by the candidates.
Great. Thank you, Secretary Chertoff. I know that Secretary Ridge has been having technical difficulties. So Secretary Ridge, we're going to jump to Senator Daschle, and then we'll come back to you. Just so you know, we have about 36 reporters on the call, Secretary. And so we'll go to Daschle and then try to go to you if you're ready at that point. And if your audio works, we'll see. So Secretary Daschle.
Oh, well, thank you, Nick. And let me
Senator Daschle, sorry.
Full agreement with Michael Chertoff and his comments just now. I know I speak for the entire council in thanking the thousands of election officials who are still counting votes all across the country, including in multiple battleground states that remain too close to call. This is our lawful process working itself out, just as we've done for decades and centuries. No candidate gets to decide who won the election. The voters do. The candidates are players, not referees. That's why our message today is simple. Keep counting the votes. The Constitution guarantees the right to vote, not the right to a quick outcome. We should all continue to be patient while this constitutional process unfolds. November 3rd was the last day.
Great. Thank you, Senator Daschle. Secretary Ridge, are you plugged in yet? I don't think so. So let's go over to Congresswoman Edwards.
You're on mute.
Thank you very much. And I am really proud to be part of this group that, as has been described, really spans the political spectrum. Politically, I describe myself as a progressive, but more importantly, with this group and what we experienced on election day and going forward is that we're all Americans and we cast our votes and we deserve to have every single one of those votes counted. I'm not a student of history. I'm not an historian, but I look back on history sometimes and I think about, for the last 223 years, we've actually transferred power peacefully. Sometimes those elections have been contentious, but the point is that Americans get to vote, they get to have their voice, and then those votes deserve to be counted. And so as we go into the next, into the coming days, no matter how long it takes, those public servants who are out there counting the votes are doing it fairly. They're doing it within the state law. And every single American who cast a vote within the state law is going to have that vote counted.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Let's go to Congressman Zach Wamp, and then we'll head over to Secretary Ridge after that.
Well, thank you all. About 2 months ago, we began to organize almost with an instinctual feeling that this was going to be close and that it could be very divisive. Had no idea that it was going to be this close. I think most people didn't think it was going to be this close, but it was, and it is, and it's still underway, and we still don't know. And we organized believing that these core principles of peace and patience and literally letting the process, these professionals at the state level who are charged duly at the state level with counting these votes, count the votes. Now, I'll say as a Republican, I'm from Ruby Red, Tennessee, and this is Trump country, big time, that it wasn't helpful for him to jump the gun last night, and it's not helpful for the Biden team to jump the gun today. And it's not just us, it's not just the council, it was Chris Christie. It was Ben Shapiro, a Republican conservative icon. It was Congressman Adam Kinzinger, all that said this morning that it's not helpful for the president to declare victory prematurely or for the Biden campaign today to declare victory prematurely. This is the country, not the party, that matters most right now. We are all band together to say, as conservatives and liberals, progressives, Republicans, Democrats, we're going to put the country first. It's more important that this process of a peaceful transfer or a peaceful retention prevail than it is a person named Trump or a person named Biden, or even a party or an ideology. It's the country that matters. We all believe that together. We're grateful that everybody voted, and many people worked really hard and waited really long to vote. We're grateful that from the far left to the far right, yesterday was a peaceful day. We're grateful that today is a peaceful day. But the closer you get to the end, no matter what it is, the more difficult it is for some people to accept the outcome. But we must all go inside to gather our sensibilities outside of our emotion to say what is best for the United States of America at the end of the day. Guys, I remember 2000. I remember how hard it was for a Democrat from Tennessee named Al Gore to accept the result, but he did it. Why? Because the country mattered most. We may be there again, and whatever the outcome is, we have to do this. This is American exceptionalism. No matter how you feel about it, this is where it matters most. Thank you all for coming together to put our country above our party.
Thank you, Congressman Wamp. Secretary Ridge, good to see you. I hope the technical difficulties have cleared up.
Well, hopefully they have. I'll be encouraged if you can say you hear me.
We're good. We're good. And I should mention too that Secretary Ridge is on the Board of Trustees of Issue 1. We're proud to have him.
Listen, if possible, to put a couple of exclamation points behind the words of Zach, I want to do that. I think it was just a tremendous assertion of what he referred to as American exceptionalism. The most fundamental process we have in this continuing experiment of self-government is vote, is the electoral process. And I'm reminded of an experience yesterday as I waited in line early in the morning, a long line. There were MAGA hats and there were Biden shirts. People were with face masks, socially distanced. And yesterday they respected the patience it took for the votes to be counted. And they respected the fact that there were multiple people in that line that were going to vote differently than they were. It was good news for America because that's how we operate. Now we're in that second phase. And that second phase involves the same respect and patience, so the voices and votes of other Americans can be heard as well. My friend Ed Rendell and I, former governor, you all know of Pennsylvania, were on a conversation this morning, and I reminded my pal, who was a big Eagle fan, and I'm on the western part of the state, and I pay pretty close attention to what the Steelers do. At halftime this Sunday, the Eagles were down by 1, and the Steelers were down by several more. The game wasn't over. But when you finally counted the scores and the game ended, a different outcome occurred. And I think most Americans can appreciate that reference. The game's not over. We have to be patient. Millions of Americans cast their absentee ballot legitimately, in time, and the soldiers of democracy, those are the men and women whom we've entrusted not just this year, but for all years, including the year that President Trump won, to count absentee ballots, who counted those ballots post-election day, are doing their jobs now. Probably more glare from the television cameras than excited analysts on television, but they're doing their job. They need time to do it. They'll do it well. They're the guardians of our democracy. So let's be patient. Let's give them the opportunity and the time to do their job well. And then regardless of the outcome, let's accept the verdict once Americans have spoken.
Thank you, Secretary Ridge. Wonderful language about the guardians of democracy. Michael Beckel, any questions from the press?
Yeah, we've got a question in the queue. And again, just a reminder, please use either the chat function or the Q&A function to submit questions to the panelists here today on the call. We've got a lot of experienced voices here who are all willing and able to answer your questions today. The first question is coming in from a Pennsylvania-based news outlet, and they're wondering about President Trump's recent comment that he would go to the Supreme Court to stop counting the vote. And he seems to be conflating at the time the 2.2 million remaining early and mail-in ballots that are postmarked on election day, but had until 8 p.m. to be received. And both the Attorney General in Pennsylvania and Governor in Pennsylvania have said that they would protect the vote being counted. I guess the bottom line of this question is that how confident can Pennsylvania voters be that their early and mail-in votes received on or by election day will be counted this year? Would anybody like to speak to that?
Well, let me address it since you refer to a state which I was privileged to be born in and serve as governor. There's absolutely no reason to be anything but confident. These are men and women, Republicans and Democrats, who take an oath and have been doing this responsibly and effectively and lawfully for year after year after year. And regardless of what the president might say, and I'm grateful and truly grateful that so many Republicans, so many conservative Republicans have repudiated his remarks as being inappropriate, I'll say un-American, because to a certain extent, he's tried to disenfranchise not only millions of Pennsylvanians, but millions of voters in Michigan and Wisconsin and Nevada and elsewhere. So, Mr. President, you were wrong. You were properly repudiated by multiple sources, including some of your Republican friends. You should have been, and Pennsylvanians should have every confidence in the world that the votes legitimately cast on a timely basis will be counted. My only caveat, not a caveat to that, and I would hope and pray that depending on the outcome, that all Pennsylvanians, regardless of their political persuasion, accept the verdict of their fellow Pennsylvanians.
Great, thank you so much for that answer, Governor Ridge. Anybody else want to speak to that issue or have any further thoughts on that?
We've been monitoring this at the National Council on Election Integrity, and we just see no signs yet that there will be any significant disruptions or have been any significant disruptions in the counting of those absentee ballots. So it's kind of steady as she goes.
Remember all the anxiety responsibility, but they exercise the responsibility in a thoughtful, peaceful way in the midst of the pandemic. That's what everyone should do as we count absentee ballots. They'll get the job done and be confident, Pennsylvania and elsewhere. These men and women know how to do it. They'll do it lawfully. They'll do it effectively. We just wait the outcome. Patience is required and patience is deserved. So is confidence.
Thank you for that addition. The next question we have is that the Trump campaign is filing a lawsuit in Michigan claiming a lack of, quote, meaningful access for poll watchers this year in Michigan. Would any of the council members like to comment on this new lawsuit?
This is new to us, and we haven't taken a look at the lawsuit yet and been able to weigh it. So I think we have to take a pass unless Secretary Chertoff, you've got something.
No, I haven't seen the lawsuit, and I don't know what they mean by meaningful access. So you can't stop people from filing lawsuits. I'm generally confident the courts will be sensible in resolving them, but we'll have to wait and see how this plays out.
Just a reminder that Secretary Chertoff has worked at the appellate court level and also as the Assistant U.S. Attorney General. So we always lean on him for his legal insight.
And certainly a number of folks, might have been surprised that we didn't get an election pick last night on election night. Would anybody like to speak to the fact of whether this played out according to what we were anticipating this year?
Well, I certainly will, because frankly, we were organized around this notion that we were likely not to know on election day, even though the American people like to know. I mean, the president's right. Everybody likes to know on election day or election night who won, but it's not unusual at all not to know. And again, in most of our adult lives, if you've been around very long, you saw what happened in the year 2000, which took until December. And as Secretary Chertoff said, our military votes come in afterwards. The elections are certified afterwards, a long time afterward. And we knew this was coming. This is not new. We knew, and that's why we organized, that there was going to be a period of time that was volatile and that we would need to unify. And we have no statutory authority. We're only bonded together by this knowledge that this was going to take some time, and that we didn't want either side to try to game the outcome or try to fix the system or try to reject reality. And there is no evidence of fraud. We've gotten this far and we've seen zero. Christopher Wray, the FBI director, told us he had not seen it ahead of time. We didn't see it on that day. Let me say to my conservative friends, this is not an election that we have any reason to doubt the actual counting of votes. There's no there. Let's try to stand on the truth, which conservatives should be about. And whatever the truth is, we accept it. Whatever the outcome is, we're going to accept it. Let's give them the time to get to the real outcome. And I say that to both camps, because any Biden assessment today that he's going to win is still premature. Let's wait until all of the votes are counted under the applicable state law, which is the way the system works. And then we will all say together who won and who lost. And then it is mandatory as Americans that we accept the outcome and go through the process of the transfer. And please, everyone, no matter how it ends, let's come together in January together as a nation and move forward. We have to start unifying around the common denominators that we all embrace as Americans. Yes, we're tribal. We all understand why, but it doesn't mean that we have to be mean or ugly to each other.
Michael, any others?
I think it's well said.
Okay.
Just to add a bipartisan note to that, I couldn't agree more with Zach. He said it eloquently, powerfully, and very passionately, and I couldn't top that. I would just add one other factor that we haven't mentioned, but it's obvious. The COVID situation this year has really complicated the whole issue around voting, which makes this experience all the more remarkable and all the more successful when you can consider that over 160 million Americans voted in spite of a coronavirus pandemic that is just destroying the normal fabric of America today. It's all the more remarkable that we were this successful. And I go back to something I said a minute ago. We owe a huge, huge debt of gratitude to every election official who stepped forward to volunteer their time and their efforts to ensure the integrity of this election. They're still working at it. And I don't know what kind of award or what kind of recognition we give them, but they deserve every bit of credit and praise that we can offer, given the job they're doing right now.
Just want to remind people too that the reason why it's taking long in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania is because the law does not allow the election officials to begin counting those ballots until the day of. There were attempts in those legislatures to move those dates up, and those bills did not pass. We strongly recommend, as the National Council, that every state move up those dates in the future, as did Florida a long time ago, so that the election officials have a longer runway to count the ballots that are coming in as we go into election day.
And Nick, as a Republican, let me say to my Republicans, in many cases, those laws were passed by Republican legislatures, not allowing those ballots to be cast ahead of time. So we did this to ourselves. Don't blame others for something that we did, please.
Well, the point is here, though, that each one of these states is counting the ballots under their state laws. And each one of them is different. I mean, I think that's actually one of the remarkable things about the American system is that every state and in these jurisdictions has created a set of rules by which they are going to count the ballots, by which they're going to conduct their elections. And our job as Americans is to respect the integrity of that process in every single state.
And I would say, to follow up on Zach's comments, to my Republican friends who appreciate the nature of federalism and its decentralized emphasis on states' rights, it's the right of the individual states who oversee the electoral process to set their own rules and timeframes with which ballots can be cast, either pre-election day or post-election day vis-a-vis absentee. So it's a system of governance that we historically have embraced and felt it is the best way to handle some of the social and economic challenges that confront America. So we basically abandon this basic tenet within our party when we begin to criticize and denigrate the federal system, which designates our states as the overseer of our national election. So let's be consistent. Let's let the states do their job and be patient and let the votes lawfully cast be counted. It's consistent with fundamental Republican principles, not consistent with the president's view of the traditional Republican view of federalism.
Michael Beckel, any other questions from the press?
Looks like we've answered all the questions that came in through the Q&A function. So again, thank you everyone for tuning in to this virtual press conference today. And thank you so much to all of our esteemed panelists for joining us to talk about the important work that the National Council on Election Integrity is doing to ensure we count every vote this year. Thank you everyone for being part of this.
Let me just add too. Let me just add too, we will continue to do these with varieties of these council members as this election plays out. We will also be releasing statements from the National Council, so stay tuned in to those. You can check us out at our Twitter account, which is CounterRevote1 on Twitter. Zach, or sorry, Tom, did you have one final thing to say?
No, I just want to thank everyone. Hope they all.
Great.
They say be well and be patient. Let every vote be counted. November 3rd was the last day to cast your vote, not the last day for the votes to be counted. Most Americans understand that. Be well.
All right. Cheers, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye, thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you all.